Hello, everyone, and welcome along here to our next installment in this AP Statistics video review series. This video is actually going to be a pretty short one. This part of Unit 1 is just about how do you compare two distributions to each other. And so what I wanted to do is make a little bit of a shorter video talking about those specifics, because one thing I've noticed in my experience over the past 9 years or so teaching this class is that where kids can lose points is not, again, it's silly little things. It's not that you don't know, but that you're missing specific wording that you're going to need to make sure that the AP readers will give you the points that you want for the question. So let's jump right into how we're going to end up doing this. What is it supposed to look like? And what is the terminology that I need to use in order to make sure I get full credit? So again, when you are comparing, it's still the same four things that we just talked about in the video about describing: shape, outlier, center, spread. The difference is now, instead of just talking about one distribution, you're talking about two distributions. I haven't seen a question where you have to describe more than two, so we'll see here. All right, maybe that'll be a question 6 or something like that. But for all of the previously released things, I've only seen two questions as part of what you have to compare. So let's look at a example question, and I think that will help to give you a better sense of what you need to do in order to make sure you get full credit. So when you compare, the biggest thing here is that you have to use comparison words. I know that sounds incredibly silly, but it's really important. Saying that distribution A is approximately normal and distribution B is skewed right does not count as comparing. So you want to use phrases like as opposed to, right? Something like that, where it's showing a direct comparison between distribution A and distribution B, right? Or a word like similarly, right? Again, a direct comparison phrase or word in this case, right? Something like which is similar or different from. Again, a direct comparison phrase. And obviously the most obvious one, compared to, right? Which I think that one is self-explanatory. But what's very important to take away from this is that you can't just describe each distribution in isolation. You can't say that distribution A is approximately normal with a center here and a spread of this, while distribution B is skewed left with a center here and a spread of that. You have to say distribution A is approximately normal as opposed to distribution B, which is skewed to the left. So you have to make those direct comparisons in order to get the points. So let's take a look at a couple of example questions, and I'll kind of talk you through my thought process, jot down a few notes, and hopefully that will be helpful. So the first example here is from 2015, and you have to compare these two box plots, working at Corporation A and working at Corporation B. Now, again, if you remember from the last video, context is king. So here, this is yearly salaries in thousands of dollars, right? So it's important that we include that in our wording. So when I compare the shapes here, I would say that both, again, both is a comparison here, box plots appear fairly symmetric. They do, right? These appear to be fairly symmetric. And again, notice the non-deterministic language. Again, for outliers, very simple. Corporation A has two outliers, and I'll list those at, we'll say about 70K And I think that second one is, we'll call that 77K. While, there's the key, B has no outliers. Now, again, if this was a formal free response question, I'm going to write these out in a little bit longer full sentences, but for the sake of this review, we'll kind of shorten it here. For the centers here, again, I would say that both have a median around $50,000. And then for my spread, here I'm going to use the range. Corporation A has a range of about, we'll say $45,000, which is greater than Corporation B, which has a range of about $20,000. So again, greater than, less than, roughly the same. Any sort of comparison word is king in a question like this. If I just said Corporation A is roughly symmetric, Corporation B is roughly symmetric. Corporation A has 2 outliers, Corporation B has no outliers. That does not count as comparing. So you need those comparison words like both, while, as opposed to, greater than, less than. It is very, very important to have those. Without that, you do not get credit. Very important. Now, the second question here. Now, again, for part A, we're going to ignore here. This is, I believe it's essentially student to teacher ratio. They call it pupil to teacher ratio. This question's a little bit older here. But this part B of write a few sentences comparing the distributions. Now, this one, again, is a little bit more difficult because we have histograms here as opposed to box plots. So when we talk about outliers, things are going to be a little bit different. But again, when I look at the shape of these, I would say that the shape of the west histogram appears to be skewed right, while the shape of the east histogram appears to be fairly symmetric, right? As compared to the east, which is fairly symmetric. Both histograms appear to have no potential outliers. The west histogram is centered around roughly 17, while the east histogram is centered around roughly 15. Again, you notice the comparison of while the east as compared to, right? And the spread of the west histogram, or the maximum range of the west histogram, is 10, which is greater than the maximum range of the east histogram, which is 7. So again, very important to use those comparison words. If it were me, my strategy for these types of questions, if you see compare the distributions, right? Again, comparing the distributions. If I go back to this one, comparing the distributions. One thing I'm going to say for myself is that I'm going to try to write one sentence. I'm going to take socks and write one sentence for each, just like I would for describing, but I'm going to write it for comparing. One sentence comparing the shapes, one sentence comparing the outliers, so forth, so on. So this isn't really anything new. It's more just a strategic thing to make sure you get the points that you deserve. That about wraps it up for this. I'll see you guys in the next one.